podcast lovers, and welcome back to the Mixed Up Mystics. This is the podcast where we talk about spiritual things of all sorts and kind of Christianity remix and all that kind of stuff. And today's conversation is about the word reverence. And I can guarantee you it's going to go places that you are not counting on, but I think you're really going to love it. Let's join the conversation.
This podcast is a presentation of Pioneer Dream, celebrating 30 years of moving stories for our corporate, nonprofit, and entertainment partners. We invite you, fellow misfits, to join the conversation with text, emails, or just messages in the comment section below. As always, you can share this podcast with anyone you think would get it by sending the link now. Thanks for listening.
Hello, fellow mystics. If this is your first time or you've been listening with us for a long time, we're so grateful you're here. This is going to be a fun conversation today, at least interesting, I think. And
I'll let you know.
I'm joined by that other voice that happens to be Anjanette, my co-conspirator and wife. Hello, Anjanette.
Hey, what's up? How are you guys?
This guy's fine. Thanks for asking.
Are you feeling mysticky today?
I am.
Mystical
Yeah.
sounds weird, so mysticky is a little better.
I'm really excited about today's conversation, even if it starts off a little obtuse. I think it'll make sense.
Oh, great. Okay, so there you go. There's the preamble to the Constitution.
Let's talk about
right
Revelations.
there. Oh, wow.
I'm kidding.
Not today, Satan.
Speaking of talks and conversations, we do have two other podcasts, which I bet you're probably aware of, but just in case you're not. We have the Dreamers Live podcast. That's all one word. I think it's with an exclamation mark too. I don't know.
Wow, you should find out.
Yeah, you'll know when you see it. And that goes along with Dreamers, which most of you know all about. And some of the same conversations we have in our live and in-person groups happen on that podcast. We just had a Dreamers Live event last weekend.
Yeah, it was really great. Really fun time. We talked about the importance of rest and relaxation and how to do that. We had some special guests. It was really fun.
It was a special episode of Dreamers that was called Chill Out, It's Summer.
That's right.
And everything that happened in that podcast was about chilling out.
Yeah, that's right. In the Dreamers Live podcast, we kind of focus on what we call intentional living.
Right.
We talk about how humaning is hard and that we do it better together. So it's kind of uplifting
Friday night
conversations.
we had guest speakers. We had Lisa Roll, who is a therapist and a body movement specialist.
I know, which is pretty cool.
She helped us with balanced breathing.
Yeah, that was good. And
I've been doing it ever since,
I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. And
no,
I
it's good.
feel much more balanced.
Do you?
Oh,
a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, but it's definitely relaxing. It helps you get to sleep fast, which is awesome.
And then we had Quentin Martin, who is the brewer at Cooper and Mill.
Yes.
And he brought in a summer shandy, which is...
that was tasty.
Oh, my gosh. It was like
it didn't really taste like beer.
Or not a light beer, but just a beer mixed with fruit. And I think he used hibiscus and something?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of tropical and sweet. It kind of tastes a little bit like lemonade.
And then
I don't
if
know.
you are particularly touched, as you and I are, you have the option of adding some vodka to that, which is...
Well, it did.
We used to call it summertime lemonade.
We did. It cuts the sweetness a little bit.
So we used to take like a half beer and then pour the other half of the glass with lemonade.
Sugar-free lemonade.
And you can add some fruit to that if you want. Sometimes we would add a lemon wedge or something like that. And
we shouldn't be having that right now instead of our
And then you could add a little
here.
scotch of vodka just to kind of, add some vitamins to it and stuff.
Spice it up. Grow some chest hair.
And then we finished by having our friend Heather Davison, who is actually a English teacher.
Yes, literary expert Heather Davis.
And she gave us the lead on some reads that you might use to distract yourself from the summer heat.
Yes, which was really fun. It was a great night. We had lots of new people. We had our Dreamers contributors, a few of them that were in town and here that we got to recognize. So it was really cool. But the Dreamers Live podcast, I think you guys would really enjoy it. Yeah. It's fun and lighthearted. We talk about meaningful things in a fun and lighthearted way.
And then there's yet one more podcast we have, which is called the Got a Minute Mini Podcast.
So many podcasts, little time.
If they didn't bring in so much money, we wouldn't do so many of them. But the God a Minute mini podcast is super cool, I think, because it lives up to the name. It's a mini podcast. So most of the episodes are like about 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
And they include what is usually like a funny chapter from the book I wrote, You Really Don't Have to Read This, which is available everywhere.
Yes.
And,
but you should read it.
So it's a funny chapter from the book. It's like an audio book for one chapter.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Then you and I talk for a second, and I interview you about one of your original songs.
Yes.
You're like 90 seconds. What was the backstory of this song, or how did this song come about?
And then you pick the song and you pair it with sort of the content of your humorous column. So it's sort of like a wine and steak pairing, wine and cheese pairing.
Yeah, then you get to hear the song. So anyway,
it's kind of fun.
Find those other podcasts, like and subscribe to those. They're really enjoyable.
So it's Dreamers Live and then Got a Minute podcast, right?
Got a Minute mini podcast.
Yes.
I'm sure you could find it if you put any of those words in.
But today on Mystics, we take a deeper dive. This is the deeper dive to all of our podcasts.
Let me start by asking this question.
Okay.
What comes to mind when I say the word reverence? Like if you were describing reverence, or what does that look like to you?
Well, not to define a word by its definition.
It's when you're reverent.
When you revere something, in my mind, you hold it in a special sacred place.
Okay.
It's something that is sort of up high. You might save that for a special time when you really want to be able to focus all of your attention and heart and soul on that. Like on a lower level, on a less divine level, like I revere time that you and I might get to spend together. Like if you have something important you want to tell me.
Right.
And so I will say, you're bad at timing. So a lot of times I'll be in the middle of 6 things and you're like, hey, I got to tell you this dream I had. I think it's really important. And I'm like, not right now, bro.
Yeah.
But the truth is that's because I revere and I hold special the time we put together. So I'll say, let's talk about it when I'm done with this. And then I can really focus on what you're doing. What is
That's a great take.
What does it mean to you?
I don't know. I think of it as something that you hold maybe separate or apart from other things. Yes. Like it takes a higher priority. It takes a higher standing. If you revere something, then it's like this. There's this, the majority of life, and then there's some things that are important, and then there are the things that you revere. Yeah. And those kind of make the top of the list to me.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was thinking about it because we've done a lot of different subjects on this podcast, and they're really, really interesting. And occasionally, some of that language in the podcast conversation gets animated, and so
especially if we've had the summertime lemonade,
which we've never had.
We've never done that. We usually true confession. We try not to have energy drinks very often, but sometimes during the podcast, we have a sugar-free energy drink. Yes, it's very exciting.
Right, but we don't drink. It's like we're like pilots. We don't drink while we're operating
the podcast equipment.
Yeah. So, but I can say that maybe I don't know, several episodes back, there were whatever the subject matter was really interesting, and we were quoting somebody else, and then I think it led to an F-bomb or two in this conversation. And
well, if I was there,
to me, it absolutely fit. And then I talked to some friends, and they said, "Oh, this was really, really good." I was kind of uneasy. I didn't know what I should do, and this, that, and the other. And I thought that's really interesting because.
You mean the F-bombs?
Yeah, because within this conversation of the podcast itself, within that episode, these friends were glued. I mean, they were really taking in this whole conversation.
Okay.
It was really moving to them. And then came this thing from Stage Right, this F-bomb, and then they were like, oh.
It took them out of
that. Yeah, now these are like two worlds.
Yeah.
Can they be combined?
Does
one take away from the other?
Which is probably why I did it.
Just this whole thing. And
yes,
so then I don't know why, but a couple of weeks ago I started thinking. In fact, I even put this in my notes app, which is kind of what I do. If anything ever happens to me, first mourn me, but then also get my phone. Make sure I'm dead first, and then get my phone.
Yes.
And then go to my notes app because I have, most of my life is. Apart from you and Evangeline, is in my notes app. So if I have a thought, if I have a dream, if I have a thing or whatever it is, if there's something that's kind of important to me, I end up putting it in notes. And so this thing came into my brain a couple weeks ago, and I actually put it in my notes, and I just thought, okay, we should not misconstrue reverence with formality, or reverence with grammar, or reverence with, quote, behavior. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, if you're trying to illustrate reverence, someone would generally walk. Like, I came from a liturgical background, tons of expression of what we would typically define as reverence. So lots of bowing, lots of kneeling, lots of genuflecting, lots of signs of the cross, all those kinds of things. So there is an outer expression that we sometimes define as or call reverence.
Okay.
But as we know, what happens on the outside and the language you use and even our manner sometimes belies what we have going on inside. So you can take the actions or use the language or use the outward expression of what we would typically call reverence, but in your heart be nowhere near reverence. So, reverence is...
It's not behavioral.
No, reverence is defined as like a deep respect for someone or something.
Word. Yeah.
And so when I think about reverence, is it a tone? Is it an attitude? Is it how we speak? Is it a formality? Whatever it is. And so I think it's easy to misconstrue that term reverence with formality or something like that, with it misconstrued as an outward expression. Okay. So when I go back and I think of, can you define reverence as, Jesus losing his mind in the temple and breaking out a whip and turning over tables and all that? Wasn't that an expression of reverence?
Right, because he was saying that the people that were selling things and made this big cacophony work for the day in the temple were not revering the actual God-given purpose for the temple, which was, this is a place of worship where people can come to pray and to be with God. And here you've turned it into this, business sideshow.
Yeah.
And so, so you're saying that when Jesus turned the tables over in the temple, that he was protecting reverence or showing reverence?
He was revealing, I think, reverence, showing and expressing reverence. That's not the picture we have of reverence typically.
Yeah.
And yet here it was. And I think about in a similar way, I think about like David, who, danced himself clean on the way to the temple with the slaves and the servants to the point where he almost fell out of his clothes and made an absolute fool of himself. But wasn't that reverence? Wasn't that a deep and enduring respect for God?
In fact, he revered God so much in that moment that he didn't care what anybody else thought. If he was holding dear the thoughts of the people around him more so than what he felt in his heart to do at the time, he would have been revering.
Reverence for him was making a fool of himself. Reverence for him was giving him his whole self. And to the point where he did not care what anybody else thought or saw. It
wasn't putting on his best suit and being quiet in the temple. It was, And
when he was called on it by in this case, his wife, he said, I'll become even more indignant than this.
Undignified.
Because the passion that he held for this person, the desire, the love that he had for Yahweh, for God, this, was so all-consuming that was everything. That was the proper expression of reverence for him in that moment. There's a reverence that does call for quiet or quietude, and there's a reverence.
That's almost an expression of reverence.
There's a holiness that will come on that will make you not want to utter a sound.
Yeah.
There's also a holiness that will make you cry out and jump and scream and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think reverence or to revere something is to have it high above everything else.
Yes.
It is a priority. It is a clearing out of everything else so that you can attend to what is most important.
Yes.
What's the difference, or is there a difference between reverence and holiness? Have we talked about holiness on this podcast? That's a tricky word. And if you need to save that for another episode.
When you said that,
similar.
The first thing that comes to my mind is it's almost like how we envision the Trinity. Like there are three, but they're also one. So in my mind, reverence and holiness and glory and all those kind of things are all overlapping, all all connected, even though they might be variants of an expression. But in our case, it would be hard to express reverence without expressing or knowing or recognizing holiness in that process.
Okay.
So, like I think of, so here's another thing. Here's another way I look at it. Right. I think of reverence as also the decisions and choices. Maybe this is why this conversation is important. I hadn't thought about that till now.
Okay.
I can think of reverence or an expression of reverence in a sense as my decided obedience to the teachings of Jesus, which is, of course, holiness too. But if I revere this person, if I respect this person, then I obey this person, those are the teachings of Jesus. Those are the words of Jesus. If you really love me, don't call me Lord if you're not going to do the things I've asked you to do. So my decision, especially when it's not easy, to obey the teachings of Jesus, that is reverence.
Yeah.
So anything else is me deciding to put something above and beyond the person of Jesus, or above and beyond the person. I'm not trying to, shame people for sin, because I am. Most of them.
That's why I'm here.
I'm the biggest of all of these.
Right.
But I have this thought, like occasionally I'll think, I want to do this. I know that's probably, whatever that is, avoid somebody or avoid something or do something or, express greed or express whatever. And I know that by making that decision, that I am then putting myself as an idol, or my comfort as an idol, above the person of Jesus, because he's asked me to refrain from this, or asked me to do something else instead, or asked me to act in love, and I am choosing in that moment to not.
Because you revere what Jesus taught, you obey that, or try to obey that. It's just like in our relationship, I revere the union and friendship and partnership that we have. And so I am, for the most part, not going to talk bad about you to other people. I'm not going to uncover the struggles that you have. I'm not going to flirt with somebody else. I'm not going to make decisions that would affect that union negatively, because I have reverence for the commitment that we have to each other, right? So is that similar?
Yeah, and in that same way then, like you were asking about holiness, and I'm saying this overlap, to me that reverence is also, of those overlapping circles, that's also the fear of God, right?
Yes.
So
that helped me. That really helped me. That's a weird phrase when you're growing up.
Yeah.
And it can be misused, if you grew up in any fire and brimstone type things, the fear of God. But to me, the fear of God is understanding that God is holy, and he is set apart and different. And then the fear of God I have as I get older, and we talked about this last week, just hanging out, would be losing God's love.
Yeah.
The fear of God would be if he were to take his Holy Spirit, or that sense of his presence from me. That's the fear of God.
So interestingly enough, this is what I wrote in my notes when I was thinking about this. I said to myself,
hello, self.
As I was trying to figure out what reverence is, so I know kind of what reverence is not, or how to differentiate it, but if I'm trying to figure out what it is, I said, isn't reverence the deep-seated belief that your life would be utterly and devastatingly, that your life would utterly and devastatingly fall apart if you lost this entity?
Yeah.
To the point that sometimes you cry out in an impassioned language of desperation that goes well beyond constrained verbiage. Isn't that the fear of God? Isn't that reverence? Reverence is knowing, in our case, that we would be destroyed if we lost this person. I would lose myself if I lost this person. I would lose. So that is the reverence, is to say, which I wake up in some mornings with panic, as we all do, which is I feel cut off. Yeah. I go through seasons where I feel cut off.
You can't feel God's presence as easily.
And you think, did I screw something up? Have I made this up? Have I, all those things that go through our brains and our hearts and minds. And then that panic ensues, that anxiety that ensues, is part of, in a sense, this reverence. Not that I want to live there and stay there, but it's saying to me, it's saying out loud, it's a consciousness and awareness that apart from this person, I fall apart. I am devastated. And sometimes in the expression of that fear and the expression of that want and desire, the language is not clean. The language is honest. Yeah. And I think if you go through and you look at the Psalms, and if we were to look at that language in the setting of when David wrote most of it, that's where that language would be. It would not all be clean. It would not all be sanitized. No. It would not all be whatever. It is, I mean, a person who would dance themselves out of their clothes like a madman, I imagine used language that was all over the place because of what was inside them that could not be constrained, that had to get out. And sometimes it was more than, gosh, I miss you.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I think reverence and holiness and honesty can work together. And
yes, absolutely.
I love the Psalms, and it's amazing when you read most of them,
right.
Especially the ones that David wrote, which I think is like the first 70 or something, maybe first 80. Anyway, he starts out a lot of times like, God, you have totally left me.
Yeah.
I'm out here with my pants down.
Right.
Things are sucking, and people are literally trying to kill me in a cave.
Yeah.
That's how they start out if you look at them. And then the amazing.
So maybe that's part of reverence, is the honesty, blatant honesty.
I revere you more than any other human. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I've tried so hard.
I am the most honest with you about everything.
Right.
And I revere you so much that I feel completely comfortable. You probably wish I did not, to be as honest as I am. That doesn't mean that I'm mean, although I can be mean. But a point is, because of that bond that we have, and like in our relationship with God, I feel like I can be the most honest.
Right.
And so in a way, I'm saving that. I'm setting that apart.
Yes.
I'm revering our bond, or I'm revering my bond with God.
Part of our love for each other is seeing each other and not requiring the other person to put on airs or to put on some other disguise or makeup to be our spouse or to be around us.
Right.
So if you came into our home and you were always kind of pretending to be this other person, pretending to be this person you're really not, if there was an insincerity in that, it would be very taxing for us. I would want you to just be you. I would want to know who you really are. I would want to know what you really feel. It would irritate me to be with someone who I didn't feel like I could connect with because they were always putting on this other face.
Yeah.
And
so that's like, I truly think that that's the deepest need of every human, is to be fully known for who they are and fully loved for who they are.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we only find that in God's love because humans are imperfect.
Right.
But because I have that love and fear it going away, not that it would, I revere that relationship the most.
Right.
I hold it in the highest esteem.
Yeah,
the most.
To me, there's such a relief and a freedom on the times when I am having a conversation with God and I am speaking through a situation, speaking through a temptation, speaking through a struggle, speaking through a fear, and I am saying in so many words, this is what is happening. This is how I feel. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I fear. And in the way of spelling it out, not as if any of it's hidden from him, but in a sense, I need to say to him, I see this too. I know this is really happening. I know this is what's going on deep inside. And so saying this out loud to you and being transparent in this to you,
is
what
reverence.
You already know, is reverence.
That
is often when I feel a sense of relief.
Yeah.
That is often when if there's not a solution, at the very least, there is this sense of relief and
just being able to speak it. It's just like when you have a friend and you're struggling with something and you
I think
say
he
that
feels
to him.
honored that I've come to him and I'm saying I can trust you with this. I can trust you with what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, what I'm going through.
Yes, because I hold you in the highest esteem. And that's the beauty.
And also because you've said, you can trust me.
Yeah.
So here I am
and
acting
pour out
on
your heart
that.
to me,
Yeah.
right.
So here I am acting on that.
Right.
And saying, you said I can trust you. You said I can come to you with anything. You say I can pour out my complaint to you.
Right.
So here I am trusting in your word, trusting in your sincerity to me by doing this. That is reverence.
Yeah, that's really good. And the beauty of the Psalms is the way that they shift. So it's like David starts by pouring out his complaint and being utterly honest. And then before it's over, it shifts to, but hey, you've always taken care of me in the past, so I know you're going to do it again. I remember when times were really good, and so I'm trusting you, and you're good. And that's the...
Sorry.
It's okay. That's the beauty of it. And one of my favorite Psalms is when David said, I was a brute beast before you.
Right.
I love that, which is basically like I was complaining and I might have used some cuss words.
Right.
And then, I remembered when I came into your sanctuary or came back together with you that you are good.
I do think it's interesting, this whole picture that God has chosen to reveal who he is to us and what his relationship with us is like and all that kind of stuff. And he has all these different pictures. Sometimes it's a husband and a wife. Sometimes it's a sheep and a shepherd and all that kind of stuff. But so often it is this parent and child relationship. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the way we've lived out our lives with Evangeline and the amount, sometimes she will be anxious or fearful to the point of kind of losing her mind. And, so she says things and, all that kind of stuff. And you realize she's freaking out, but she's freaking out because of what's going on, what she's feeling in the moment. And so as parents, we don't reprimand her for that. Right. We want her to express that. And in that expression, we have a chance to approach her and help her in whatever way we can. But we understand as parents what she is going through,
sure,
what she is feeling. And I think the fact that God knows us and loves us, in a sense, he's big enough to handle it. He's big enough to, he can handle the truth. He's big enough to handle all that stuff in that conversation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think, when we pour out our complaint to God, that I think we can be absolutely and completely honest because we hold him in the highest esteem.
Right.
But it's not a place that we're designed to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, the Psalms didn't start out, hey, you've totally left me.
Exactly.
You're the worst. I can't find you, and bye. I mean,
yeah, and that's the other part of reverence is
this
adoration, this love, this devotion, this acknowledgement
but I trust
of the acknowledgement that he's trustworthy, and the acknowledgement that he's good for his word and all that stuff. I don't mean that in a goofy, Christian way. I just mean good for his word. Like, we have this relationship that is based on intimacy, and in that intimacy, he has earned our trust, and so we can hold on to that.
Yeah.
Another part of this thing that I think is an expression of reverence, though it can easily go off the rails, is this sense or this anxiety that we sometimes feel, or that I feel, not just sometimes, frequently, which is that somehow I will misrepresent who he is or fail to the point that somehow I would detract from him, and not stop somebody from, magically qualifying for the next life or whatever that is, but more that I would get in the way of someone knowing him and experiencing him and living with him now. Okay. So that to me is a thing of saying what I have in this person, what I have in this entity is so good, so amazing, so life transforming, so life saving, that I would really want others to have that now. And so there's an anxiety and a fear that says, God, I hope I don't ever screw that up for somebody. I hope I don't ever misrepresent this to the point where someone couldn't accept this or acknowledge this or experience this. And
unfortunately, you're not that important.
I know,
so.
but that to me is a reverence as well.
Yeah,
it's like
definitely.
this is so good. I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in the way of this for somebody. I don't want to, all those kind of things. And so,
sure.
Yeah, that to me is an expression of reverence as well.
Do you think that we need more reverence in our life? Can you create reverence? I mean, what's the importance of that? Why were you thinking about this?
I was thinking about it from the standpoint of misconceptions about what reverence is. So I think in a sense, people might get involved in a certain level of stoicism and a certain level of keeping God at arm's length, and calling that reverence
rather than a personal connection.
Right. Or even, God's too holy for me to use this language, or God's too holy for me to do, when really I believe that holiness is a matter of the heart. Yes. If you go through and you look at the Gospels and even the letters that happen after that and the things that happen, there are a handful of events that look absolutely identical with absolutely different outcomes. Okay. And they're all based on what's happening in the heart of the person, so that says to me, that it's not about the action necessarily. It's not about the language. It's about what is driving that language, what is behind that action. And that is a matter of the heart. Yeah. And so reverence to me is a matter of the heart. And so I would much rather have the intimacy of being with someone where they felt like they could say anything and we could have that conversation and they could use that language to express what's going on in the depths of their pain. Yeah. That's intimacy with me versus someone keeping me at arm's length and using buttery language and all that kind of stuff.
And seeming perfect and together.
And not coiffed. Leveling with me in a way that, so I can't help in that way.
I level with you and I'm the most honest with you because I hold our relationship in the highest esteem. Right. I revere it.
You also, there's a certain level of trust with us that that you're not going to use that against me later or vice versa, or that's not going to end what we have or any of those kind of things. So there's that intimacy, that trust enables us to have that conversation.
What were we listening to? Was it Anne Lamott and her husband Neil? That one guy, Neil. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, but they were talking about how they fell in love and got married quite a bit later in life, in their 60s. And I think they'd had troubled relationships before, but they kind of started to see if it was going to work. There's not as much time to waste, I guess, by sort of telling each other embarrassing things.
Yes.
So they got to this level.
Even shameful things.
Shameful things, that's right. Or things that felt shameful to them. So I remember her saying, I think we were listening to a podcast with them talking on it, that she would they'd be watching TV and it would remind her of something in her past life, where she really, something she felt shameful about. Yeah. And she would just say, can you pause that for a second? And she would just tell him immediately. Yeah. But it was like a shortcut to that intimacy and that closeness that they have, that bond. Right. And so it would be cool if we were like that with God, that we would stop and say, and we do some, I think, but if we felt that comfortable to say, this really makes me feel ashamed. Yeah. And here's why. And that you would just, as things appear, that you would hold that relationship as a place of safety so much that you would just release those things immediately. Yeah,
I think that I don't know if I can do a good job of putting this in words, but I think that
I'll let you know.
Thank you. I
ready?
Appreciate that. Okay. I think this thing about reverence, it would be hard for us to have reverence for God if we didn't take God at His word, if we didn't trust Him. I guess you can have a mood. You can revere a king without trusting the king. I don't know.
I don't think so.
But with God, it's like, if I can't trust Him with my inner me, the open, honest, naked inner me, then is there really reverence there? Isn't reverence saying, here is all of me in my absolute most vulnerable state, in my, if you breathe on this wrong, it's going to be destroyed. That's how vulnerable all this is. Yeah. The most, and I'm putting this in your hands. That's how much I revere you. That's how much I trust you. That's how much love I have for you. This is the most precious thing I have, all of me, the naked me. And I'm giving this to you because I revere you.
Yes.
that's reverence.
That
reverence. Intimacy, that trust is reverence. And so I think there's a lot of different tangents from this conversation, but I think that's why reverence is important, is because as a conversation is because we're saying, okay, I am preferring you and obeying you. Mm-hmm. And that is reverence.
Yeah.
So I can't say I revere God and then not obey him.
Right.
I can't say I revere God and then hate someone else and disobey that command. I can't say that I revere God and then continue to choose me over him time and time and time again.
Yeah, because we revere God, we choose, even though it's hard and feels better to hold on to anger or to hold on to unforgiveness. But because we revere him, we say, this is hard for me and I still really want to hate that person. Right. But you ask me to forgive. And because I hold you in the highest esteem, I'm going to ask with your help that you change my heart so that I can do that. So it's saying no to what you want in that moment. Yeah. And doing what the other does because you care for them that much.
So, reverence is with all these kind of, what's it called when circles connect and...
Venn diagram?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Some of the C. It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, so in this reverence is intimacy. Mm-hmm. I think it's difficult to have true reverence with God without intimacy. Yeah. Reverence is honesty. It's coming unshielded. It's dropping the facade. It's dropping the fake us, the imposter us. Reverence is obedience because it is saying, you are up here above all of this, and anything else that when I choose, and I'm not saying we're not going to screw up, and I'm going to screw up more than you, so don't worry about it. But
probably right after this podcast.
But the point of it is, it's still our intention. It's still our want. Yeah. So when I am choosing to do what I want over the commands of God, over the teachings of Jesus, then I am elevating myself above him. And so reverence is obedience.
It's I think reverence is a matter of the heart. It's a mindset. It's an attitude, and it is not behavioral. However, if we revere someone,
it will show up.
It affects our behavior.
Yeah, it'll show up in our actions
because we hold them high.
Reverence is deciding
what it takes to keep that relationship
Reverence
safe.
is deciding this is what's important to you. Yeah. So now it will be important to me. So you said, I will define myself as love. Who am I? I am love. Mm-hmm. You said that this is to love God and to love others. All the commandments, the entire book that we call the Bible, hinges on this. Do this and you fulfill the law. Yeah. So if that is the case, then that becomes my priority. Yes. That becomes my value. Loving God with all that I am, and my mind and my heart, my body, my whole being, and then loving others around me, becoming aware of them, seeing them, responding to them, trying to take this love that we feel from God and give it and express it in some artistic format to other people, which is, comes out in everything that we do.
Yeah. So in essence, the best way we can prove reverence or show reverence is by doing what is most important to God and the way he defines himself, which is freely giving love to everybody we meet in a day.
Yeah. And then I think we do have an understanding or an insight into holiness, And holiness is an expression of that reverence, which is, I would never want to betray you. And reverence is, the holiness is saying, I would never want to lose you. And so I just would never want to do anything, And that's when, holiness sometimes becomes quiet. And that's when sometimes holiness becomes a whip in the market, at the temple courts. And, it's not what, it's why.
Yes. Always. A matter of the heart. Definitely. Well, this is some deep shit.
It is some deep shit.
I just threw some people off right there. Well, that wasn't very holy.
What else are you going to say? It is deep shit.
Though.
Yeah, but it's well worth considering. And I imagine you mystics, when you're done with this, if you sit for a minute and let this sit with you for a minute, there'll be some things that spring to you. There'll be some understanding or some insights in your own life of what reverence looks like, in terms of what we watch and what we listen to and who we talk to and what we talk about and all those kind of things. Reverence is an expression in there somewhere. The way that we express the person of God through our art, through ourselves, through our conversations, that's all reverence. And it's some deep shit.
Yeah.
And it is, again, it's not the what, it's the why.
Yeah.
It is, everything emanates from the heart. Everything radiates from the heart. And reverence is an expression of what is already happening in here in our hearts. And just like you and I would not constrain ourselves to talk formally to each other because we love each other intimately, that's the way our language fits with each other, which is an intimate language, And so that's...
Isn't it cool to think that in the midst of living in this world, which is so broken down, kind of a shithole at times,
right.
And there's so much pain and, even aging, all the different things that we experience as a human, isn't it beautiful to know that there is this thing, there is this person, there is this love to revere, this beautiful, unmarred, shining, full of glory, beauty and love, this presence, this that's there.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm so tired of this place, even though we have a great life, it's just you get tired of being around.
Right.
I can go and be with God and take time, I guess, to revere him.
Yeah.
To just hang out a little bit and let his peace return. And I'm just so glad that is there.
Yeah.
It makes things here seem not so bad.
Well, we talked, maybe it was the last time we had a Mystics podcast. I don't remember. I don't get the episodes kind of confused, mixed up. But we had an episode called Heaven on Earth, which I think it might have been the last one we did.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
And the whole thing is that when you come into the presence of God or the mojo, the glojo of God, you are coming into the essence of who he is. And the end result of that often is this reverence for the holiness and the presence of life, the realization that he is the source of life and all goodness and all this stuff. But the end result of it is now that you've come in contact with that, it makes you feel more alive inside.
Yes,
it
you can
renews
breathe that
you.
in.
You have hope now. So, in this world, in a daily experience, I mostly feel, pretty drained. But the moment you come into contact with Glojo,
it's like just a drop of it.
It just changes, and you think, "Oh, no, I can live. I can breathe. I can do all this stuff."
Yeah, because this is there,
right?
And I think actually reverence, and this is another podcast for another day. But the word worship, that word has gotten really Christianed out, I guess. But I think when we take a minute to step aside and allow God to refill us, and we reflect on him or revere him, that is worship.
Yes.
I mean, I lead worship sometimes, which is what we define as music and singing, which can set an attitude for people to revere God and to be reminded of that. But worship comes in many forms.
Yes.
And I think sometimes just stepping out and taking a moment to breathe and to reconnect with who God is and the brilliance of his presence changes everything in a day.
Yeah,
everything.
It does. Well, it makes us alive, which is one of the reasons why we revere him so much, because he is the one that makes us alive, the one that renews us. Otherwise, I would give up hope, So I have a fear of losing him because of that, So, well, Mystics, that was no small conversation.
No, good talk, Russ.
You know what? Maybe you have a topic that you're interested in or that you'd like us to consider talking about as part of this podcast. We'd love to do that. So just message us. You can, there's a little fan text message button on most of these podcast platforms that you listen to us on. So you can do that or just put in the comments or whatever. But we'd love to hear from you. And meanwhile, reflect on this. See what reverence looks like to you. Maybe you have some thoughts in that. And it's a worthwhile conversation, and maybe want to start this one over again and try it again just to hear all the stuff.
Maybe we should listen to it after.
I guess so. Yeah. But we're looking forward to doing it again. Thanks for listening, friends.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys.
And until next time, peace out.
Thanks for listening. We'd love it if you'd like and subscribe to the podcast and then share it with the people you know. We want to include as many people as possible in the conversation. Thanks. This has been a production of Pioneer Dream.